We're here today with Shane Hastie. How are you today, Shane?
Good, Tony. Great to see you again. It's been a
Thanks.
while.
Yeah, it has been a while, and for anybody who's watching this, Shane and I go back on would be at least 15 years. So this is sort of we're showing our age.
Yeah.
You by the colour of the hair, and me by the fact that I don't have any. So anyway, we'll continue on with that. Shane, I might be
Yeah.
pointing though that I know all of your background, but it might be good for you to do an introduction as to who you are and where you've been.
Cool. Who am I? Well, Shane. Yeah, Shane Hastie. About to change my day job. By the time this comes out, I will be back with SoftEd in a global head of delivery role. I'm lead editor for all things culture and methods on infoq.com. I'm an ICF accredited coach working towards my ICF ACC certification. I do carry the moniker of an agile coach. I've been in and around the agile community for, well, longer than you and I have known each other, a couple of decades at least. And I'm a father and grandfather.
Brilliant. That's a fairly
Yeah.
good synopsis of the Shane that I know. So that's brilliant. So one of the things that I got you on the cast today, yeah, notwithstanding that we're good old friends and stuff like that, but it's really having to talk about some of the work that you've been doing at the moment. One of the ones that really I think it's a fantastic thing because over the years we've talked about it many times, and one of the other gentlemen who's working with you on it as well, Craig Smith, I know he's working.
Yeah.
He's a good friend of mine as well. We've talked about this particular subject, and to see it starting to crystallise and someone doing something around it is fantastic, and that is ethics in coaching. So, Shane, talk to me about what you're doing with this ethics in coaching and letting everyone know.
Okay, so yeah, you mentioned Craig. He and I had an agile conference with a couple of others a while back over, as one does at some of these events, sitting down, pondering things deeply over hard liquor. Of an evening, we were talking about the difference between agile coaching and professional coaching. Both Craig and I have been looking at that stage the ICF. I've gone further. I've actually gone down the path of doing the training, and I'm working towards the ICF formal certification as a professional coach. And one of the characteristics, one of the key things about becoming a professional coach in that space is you are required to sign, and you have to actually physically sign it and commit to abiding by a code of ethical conduct. And the agile coaching doesn't at the moment have something like that.
No.
And we've seen a lot of what I would classify as unethical behavior in the agile space. So, Craig and I, both being very closely involved with the Agile Alliance, thought that this would be something that would logically fit under that big tent, under that big umbrella. It wasn't something that we wanted to take, say, to at that stage, I was working for IC Agile full time, or any of the certification bodies, because we didn't want it associated with any particular brand. We wanted it to be across the board in terms of agile coaching. So we approached the Agile Alliance with a proposal for an initiative to draft a code of ethical conduct for agile coaching. That was approved, so we reached out to we shoulder tapped people, but we also did put up a bit of a public, tell us if you're interested, who wants to be involved. We ended up with about 35 people, and over the following, it was a year and a half. This was written by a committee. We came up eventually with 18 statements in 9 topic areas about agile coaching. And there's a little bit of a preamble, and then there's these bullet points. Basically, this is what we expect of somebody who is going to hold themselves up as an agile coach to behave. These are the behaviors that we expect to see.
Yeah, I think that's so. What you're saying to me there, I like the fact that it's framework agnostic. I take it
Yeah.
by the very fact that you've used the Agile Alliance, because that's what they are as well, framework agnostic as such, which is a good thing. The other thing is, and I'm going to put my finger on a little hot spot now, because I know this for people who are listening, and probably for yourself, is, I've talked about it for a while, but we've seen the rise of what I call the $25 coach. You run a course, and all of a sudden I can go in and tell organisations and people what to do and abide by no rules, right? Or undertaking. And I take it this is where part of what you're trying to work with.
Yeah. So point 2 of the 9 is about acting within my ability, and the 2 statements in there is, I will be open and transparent about my skills and experience, and I will not claim to have abilities or knowledge that I do not have. And also, I will be open with the client if I believe they need another form of professional help.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Okay, so I like them, and I have seen them. And my question to you about that is how do we get this, and we get people to take these on? Because from what I've seen, those that are not abiding by this are probably not likely to actually get involved with it in any way.
Yeah. We absolutely. And we would love to see more and more of these types of conversations happening as part of it, just to socialize it, to get it out there that it exists. The thing that I would really love to see is employer organizations taking this on board and saying, if you want to be a coach for us, sign this and abide by this. As coaches, I want people to be taking this with them and making it part of their coaching agreement. That here is the criteria, the set of guidelines that I am going to bring, and you can hold me to this. And I think that brings a level of professionalism. Now, if comparing it to the ICF, for instance, and other bodies that have professional codes of conduct, there is an extra step, that is a registration. As an ICF accredited coach, you actually have to sign the thing, and you are deliberately putting yourself under the discipline of that body. So if I'm coaching somebody as a professional coach, I have signed the ICF Code of Ethics, and part of my engagement with my coaching client is a copy of that Code of Ethics, and this is how you can complain. If you feel I have in any way violated anything in this, this is where you go and complain to. We haven't got that in this Agile Coaching Code of Ethics, and I want to put a yet there.
Yeah.
This is something I hope to see happen in the future, but at the moment, it's just the existence and the fact that we're starting to socialize it, we're getting out there. I would hope to see coaches bringing this with them, and client organizations saying, okay, well, there is a code of ethics. Do you abide by it? Have you signed that? So starting to put a little bit of pressure on these people, because you're right. There is nothing stopping anyone calling themselves a coach. And the same is in whatever area of coaching. So the ICF has done this well for professional coaching.
Yes, they have.
But there's and even within the ICF, the worst penalty they can do is deregister you. There's nothing they can't stop you. It's not like engineering or medicine or something like that. I don't know if we'd ever want to get to that level, but certainly at least having the framework is a good starting point.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, again, I'm going to touch a hotspot again, but that's what I do, is I see there's a part to play for consultancies. All types and frames, if they're going to employ people, perhaps if we can get consultancies to start thinking about this as well, because that makes a big change in the environment. It can be a delineating factor as to why you would go with a consultancy, is what I see.
Yeah. All of our coaches have signed and will abide by this code of ethical conduct.
Yeah, I think that would be a brilliant thing to do. So you've spent some time with that. It's not well known at the moment. So is there a trajectory of getting this out there, Shane, or how do you word of mouth, or people like me, or
it's all of that. It's trying to get in front of as many meetup groups and events as we can. We've put in a proposal for a talk at Agile 2022. I'd say that it's we're low in the S curve, but hopefully we're going to see more and more publicity, more and more exposure of these ideas. It's taken us a while to get here. The conversations with a group of 32 to 35 people, we debated every word. We have approached all of the certification bodies, and they are supporting it.
That's good. Yes,
we're seeing it starting to creep into the teaching. I see Agile references ethics, for instance, in the Coaching Agile Transitions course. Well, we're seeing more and more of the classes that are touching on this topic actually bringing in, here is a code of ethical conduct for Agile coaching. And we've released it Creative Commons. We want people to use it. There's no restriction on how it can be used.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So the other hard question that I had when I saw that, wrote these down for you as usual. My thought around it is, and you are on a cast that's around remote, and so that brings a whole bunch of different things to the game, right? So my question, has that been considered in these coaching ethics? Because it does bring a whole set of different slight ethics that you've got to think about when you remote frame.
We tried to make it as delivery mode agnostic as possible. So it's not when we sit down in person to have the conversation, it's when we are interacting. That one, let's touch on the social responsibility topic, including diversity and inclusion. I will seek opportunities to bring different voices to the conversation. And I will not condone or allow or perpetuate discrimination in any form.
Brilliant.
Now, how that plays out could be through any medium.
Right. That's good. No, and I had to ask that question because I think people will be asking that question, going, okay, because we would have to say right now that majority of work within Australia, particularly, and I know New Zealand is, I should mention Shane is in New Zealand, by the way. In New Zealand would be, about 80% work from home and about 20% face to face. So it really flipped its world on the head. And so that's why I ask those questions whenever I see these things now. Have we considered that? Because it really takes into account a lot of different things. Like, there's a lot of that psychological safety that we have to think about in the work in people's homes. And as a coach, because I do this a lot, I'm very cognizant of the responsibility that I have to understand that and work with that, and understand too where it's time for me to step out. So that's the other thing about the coaching ethics is that for myself, and I know I've spoken with you and Craig about this many times, is to know when it's not the place of a coach to be. You're stepping into the place of a considered professional and in a considered avenue of that type of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to section number 2. I will be open with the client if I believe they need another form of professional help. And there I will be transparent about any potential conflicts of interest with all who might be affected, and I will not act with dishonor. I will offer to withdraw from the relationship if a conflict cannot be addressed. Ensuring value. I will ensure that the relationship has value, and I will not extend it unnecessarily or create dependencies that extend the relationship. Now, that's a tough one if you're a consultant coach, because actually I do have a vested interest in extending the relationship.
Yeah, so there's a counterbalance there, isn't there? But I think if I read the intent or I listen to the intent of that, right?
Yeah.
I've looked at that. The intent of that is not to restrict trade. It's to say where necessarily you do not have those skill
Yeah.
sets either within your organization, within yourself, then you need to actually fess up and say, we need somebody else to do
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I see that. So
Yeah. And don't milk the cash cow.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
because you can do a lot of damage, right? And this
yeah.
has been my
Yeah.
consistent feedback in many years. I mean, I'm saying things I've
Yeah.
said in many podcasts that people have heard me say before. And the very inference of the influence and the ability that we have to talk to people, we also have a double-edged sword that we can do a lot of damage very quickly.
Yeah. Yep. The other part of that ensuring value is I will be open with the client if I believe the value in the relationship is declining.
Yeah, and that's a hard one, you know. So,
That's a hard one.
especially particularly with consultants or contract, because that's where the money comes from. Right?
Yeah.
So, but sometimes, I think that to me really harks on just having that sense of ownership that you know that this is not working out.
Yeah.
And you need
And we've seen it so often. You see it, and the the coaches who are self-aware all start to feel really uncomfortable. What extra value am I adding here? I've done all I need. This organization, and maybe it's a matter of I can move within the organization to another area, another team. So we're not saying resign your job if you're an employed coach. And hey, I've done what I can with this area of the business. Well, maybe it's time to move to another area of the business.
And I think that's, I've always been very clear, my thoughts on that. My thoughts on that are very clear that as a coach, I'm there to help you build your capability and your capacity to do this job and build people that can, or help grow people that can do that. And so that you don't need me anymore. Because the reality is, if I do that well and you don't need me, at some stage you will need me again and you'll get me back, right? So, I don't get seen as the ephemeral cash cow.
Yeah.
That's brilliant, Shane. I'll move on a little bit now, and it's not just like that. I think that's a whole brilliant thing, and we'll make sure at the end of the cast that we get you to let everybody know how they can get involved and where that is. But let's go a little bit further down the rabbit hole as we discussed. You've been working quite some time, both with InfoQ and ICA, etc., in the remote frames, particularly in the last 2 years. But you were touching much like us on that before that. And I'm really interested to hear your take on where we're headed now, right? What I mean by that is, like, I know remote is a thing, and there will be some stages where we get thrown into fully remote. There's no doubt about that. Is that going to continue on? Well, in some instances, some organisations will take that bit by the teeth, and it will stay that way. But I do believe that the hybrid method will be part of that. I'm interested because you're a different voice in it, and you've been sitting in different views of it, what you're seeing and where you see that's going to go.
Yeah. Hybrid. In the latest iteration of the remote working exploration on InfoQ, one of the things we said there is that hybrid work is becoming the new normal. It's the buzzword for 2022 is definitely hybrid.
Yeah.
It's how do we find that right balance of in-person and remote, and how do we avoid it being the worst of both worlds?
Yes.
And I've seen a whole lot of that absolute worst. Half of the team is in the office, the other half is remote. So what do? We take a conference room, we put a laptop with Zoom on there. We might project it up on a big screen, and the people who are remote can hear one word in 3 or 5 of the conversations. The people who are not in camera view are having the side conversations, and it's a nightmare.
Yes.
So first and foremost, being really, really deliberate about not doing that, about managing the interactions, the flexibility, agreeing with your teammates. What is an appropriate mix of in-person and remote? What are the events where we need to be in person for, or as much as possible to be in person for? Understanding the reality of some people's lives. You and I are pretty comfortable. We've got dedicated space that we can sit in and work in. We can close the door. We're not sharing the dining room table with our spouse and with 3 children who are trying to study from home at the same time. That type of forced remote was really, really hard, and it's still continuing to a certain extent with the lockdowns in different parts of the world. But the more deliberate employees want the flexibility. It's becoming a source of competitive advantage for organizations, is that ability to offer remote. It also means that we're able to bring on people irrespective of geography. So there's a whole lot of value there. I've been deeply entrenched in the training industry for the last 20 years, and one of the things we're seeing there is both employers and course attendees like the remote training when it's designed well, when it's done well. Because one of the things about that is you can spread courses out. You're not bringing this instructor to a city from another city, bringing people together for 2 days and trying to inject the knowledge into them and then running away. Well, now we can take that same 14 hours of content and we can spread it over 3 weeks, 3 hours at a time, 7 sessions or 4 sessions, however you want to juggle it. And in between those sessions, people can go away and apply. And then when they come back, they go, you spend time exploring. So you can flip the classroom, you can flip the learning model and make it much more experiential. And then that synchronous time becomes incredibly valuable. In the training space, one of the worst things you can do is try and run a 7-hour, 2 7-hour Zoom calls 2 days in a row. You've destroyed people.
Yes.
So it's easy to do it badly. It's hard to do it well, but if you do it well, it really works. So the same is the case for the hybrid office. It's easy to do it badly. To do it well, you've got to put a lot of thought into the design of the physical space, the design of the remote engagement environment, the interaction with the people. How do you make sure that those who are remote really do have the right technology? If you're working from home, it's not good enough just to have a laptop. You need at least 1, maybe 2 external monitors. Though the setup I've got in front of me here is a laptop, an external camera, and 2 large monitors. That makes it pretty straightforward for me to be reasonably effective in my work. If I was trying to do everything that I do on that tiny laptop screen, I'd go nuts.
And I did it for a while.
Yeah.
In the beginning, and I think many did.
Yeah.
I think we all experienced that when we all went home very fast. But I think
Mm.
we've come a long way in 2 years.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, Shane. I was interviewing Jürgen Appello last night.
Mhm.
One of the things I mentioned to him, and I'm interested to get your take on it as well. My new favorite question, so to speak, because I'm seeing it. Interestingly enough, when we get you talked about the office, and I totally agree. You have to actually design your remote working contextually for your organization.
Yeah.
However, there are other things that go with that as well. So what I'm seeing is in the hybrid mode, and I don't like the word hybrid, so I'm a little ardent with that when I'm working with teams at the moment. What I'm seeing is that the team that's actually physically, or the people that are physically in, are taking what I call basically they're taking the cultural ascendancy, if you like.
Yeah.
And they're running it, and the people at home or in the screen are sort of just tagging along for the ride.
Yeah.
My thing around that is talking to them around that and saying, you realize that you're remote now. They're all looking at me going, saying, if one's home, then you're working remote, because you're remote to them, they're remote to you. So therefore, whatever you were doing when you were thinking about it, when you were fully remote, you need to amplify that about 10 times, because you've got this physical thing going on, and they can't see what you're doing in the side conversations that you're having.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a hobby horse to me, that one.
Yeah. My advice to teams when they're getting together with some people in person, some remote, treat everyone remote.
Yep, that's exactly my thoughts as well, Shane.
Yep.
I concur greatly. All right, I'm going to move on a little bit. I'd like to traverse through a few things with you while I've got you.
Cool.
For those that don't know you greatly, you wrote a book which was No Projects with Evan Laban, which is a great book. So if you get a chance and you're watching this, heartily suggest you read that, because it is a really great book. But I'm not going to talk about that one, because I know that you're in the throes of writing another book, and I'm interested for you to give that synopsis of what you're up to with it.
All right, I'm doing this one with Steve Adolph and Ryland Layton, and we're calling it The Rock Crusher. And it's about the work that you do before things get into the backlog. Now, we're really, really good at managing the backlog. If we think of it in the Scrum model, the image is almost always a series of stacked plates. You might sometimes see an image that shows some of the plates that are further away are fatter than others, and you'll do something with them. But there's not a hell of a lot of what do we do to the left of that. The ideation, the initiatives, how do we get that in there? So the metaphor that Steve and I came up with is this concept of a rock crusher. I actually did work decades back with the diamond industry in the kimberlite fields. No, so not the alluvial where they're panning for diamonds. It's more where they're blasting these big chunks of rock out, and they're putting them through crushers, and they're breaking them down smaller and smaller and smaller. And most of what they are doing is getting rid of stuff. And if we think about our backlogs and the requirements and all of the requests for our products and all of that stuff, the ideation stuff, most of what we should be doing is getting rid of stuff. We know from the Standish Group survey, 68% of the features in a typical product are never used. Well, let's not build the 68% of features that are never used. And the reason they get built is because we haven't got a good filter mechanism. Well, how do we take those rocks, those big chunks, break them down, and discard a lot of it? The waste gate is something we talk about in our graphic is a funnel. And these big ideas come in in the top, and you break them down, and you break them down, and you break them down. You throw away a lot. You find those gems, and those are the things that end up in the stack plate backlog for the Scrum teams.
Yeah, so that's an interest. So who are you facing that book at, though? So who's the voice you're aiming at? Is it? And I say that because I had the pleasure of working with you many years ago on the Babok. So we aimed a lot of what we were doing at that time at BAs, because that was really, BAs were new to that whole agile frame. Is it the voice of that, or is it the voice of product owners, or
there's a hint in that we're publishing it with the IIBA. So yes, that analysis audience is a big part of it, but it's also the product management community. It's the people who are coming up with these ideas.
Okay, because
helping them.
From what I see, and you probably thought of this anyway. So, but what I see at the moment, traversing the industries that I do, business analysis in that skill of story mapping and journey mapping and breaking the work down has come many yards since we started doing this 21 years ago or something, right?
Yep.
and literally we had to drag people to the well to say, break the work down small and it will look after itself, right? And that's a sort of acknowledged thing now. However, what I'm seeing is because of the rise of product ownership and product management, is that's probably the new voice we need to talk to about breaking the work down, because they have most of the influence around that.
Yeah, very, very much so. So yeah, that product owner role, the product management, and one of our metaphors is it takes a village. We going back some of the conversations we had, product ownership is a team sport. Well, it's extending that concept. So product management is part of it, business analysis part of it, your various stakeholders. And this is something that I think we've hit some troubles with in the agile space. We've got this fixation on the customer, really, really important key stakeholder. But we also have a whole community of stakeholders around that customer whose needs we need to meet as well.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. That's interesting. I like that, Shane. Sorry.
I love the work from Menlo Innovations in their high-tech anthropology. And they give us 3 layers: primary, secondary, and tertiary. And when you come up with your personas, you have to identify who's your primary persona. This is in most agile models, this is the customer that they're identifying. But then you have at least 2 players, and in fact, in high-tech anthropology, they limit you to 2 players in the secondary space and 3 players in the tertiary space. So you have to meet the needs of that customer in the middle, and while doing so, support the needs of the others.
Yeah, it's an interesting. The reason I interjected, I didn't mean to talk over you before, was just immediately you said that the thing that clicks in my head, and again, this is something that I tend to end up working with a lot, is we know that there's a rise of those roles, the UX and experiential modes of work, but they tend to end up siloed away from the work, and then you end up with large pieces of work which are not encompassed in terms of what you're trying to do when you're breaking the work down. So I see that as probably one of those pieces where you said it's the stakeholders or the people around or the customer around that, because again, it was an interesting conversation with Jürgen last night. You can have a fantastic product, but experientially or usability wise, it can be an absolute load of rubbish, and so therefore you don't meet the brief anyway, right?
Yeah, and going right back, Frederick Brooks, the hardest part of building a software system is deciding precisely what to build. And he said that in 1987.
And we're still doing those lessons, right? So it's an interesting thing. We got away with it. I think again, I'm going to touch a hot spot. We haven't got too much time, but I'll do a little poke there. Is I think the rise of these scaling frameworks have created the sausage factory mentality of these big features that can be pushed through these so-called value chain trains. Because that's just, and I'm not just poking that particular scaling mechanism. Scaling as a general. That has propagated that thought.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that while for almost all of the scaling models, the intent was really good, I see the implementation bringing us back to silos and a different type of waterfall thinking.
Yeah. It's creating those silos, and as we say in remote AF, we create the chasms, right? So you've got a way to reconnect against those. So, Shane, we're really close to the end of our time, I'm afraid. We could talk forever, you and I. So that's other people I've interviewed as well. So, but it is so true. I want to give you that opportunity to let people know, firstly, how they can get involved with the ethics, how they can find out when that book is coming out, and anything else you'd like them to know.
Right. So the ethics work, the agilealliance.org/agile coaching ethics. or just go to on the Agile Alliance website, search for ethics. It's a member initiative, the Agile Coaching Ethics Initiative. And in there, you can access the full code, and you can access and download a set of ethics scenarios that where we've taken real situations that we've seen, anonymized them to protect the guilty, so to speak, and then analyze them and said, okay, what was an appropriate response to this, or what was an inappropriate? And the ones that we had a lot of fun with, what are the gray areas? What are the things where it's not really that clear, and how would you make decisions? And there's some really good, we think, food for thought in there to provide guidance for people who are in difficult situations. So, and we also have an email address which is on that website, asking for feedback. You know, how does it land? What could be improved? What are there? Have you got other examples? For me personally, just LinkedIn. My my LinkedIn name is Shane Hastie. My Twitter profile is @Shane Hastie. Any of those will get me.
Brilliant. And the book. And the book.
And the book is going to be out. Well, we're hoping probably Q2, Q3 next year, and it will be coming out through the IIBA press.
Well, I'll make a promise that when that does come out, we'll get you back on, and we'll have a right rollicking time walking through it. So,
look forward to it.
Shane, it's been wonderful having you on. Thank you for spending time with us here at All the Remote Things, and thank you greatly.
Thank you, Tony. It's been great to catch up, and yeah, I look forward to hearing from folks.